law. In her conclusion, West outlines 3 structural reasons to explain why the connections between the law and literature movement and feminist legal studies will persist and grow. Write an essay that 1. Identifies which of these reasons you find most compelling, 2. Discusses any challenges to or skepticism about West's argument, and 3. Uses examples from our class readings to explain why. Skepticism to West's argument. I really didn't find any skepticism to West's argument. I think she made really good points all throughout her writing. I think that all her ideas about violence against women and ideas about law and literature had really strong foundations. She seems to be very educated in the subject of law and literature, as well as feminist legal studies. What law/literature is. Law and literature is an interdisciplinary field that explores the relationship between law and literature. It involves looking at literary works through the lens of legal theory and examining the ways in which legal concepts and issues are represented in literature. Often, scholars of law and literature use literary works to examine legal issues, such as how the law should be applied in particular situations, how legal rules affect individuals and society, and how the law works. They may also analyze the ways in which literature reflects social and cultural attitudes towards law and justice, or how legal themes and ideas are expressed in literary texts. Overall, law and literature provides a unique and valuable perspective on both legal and literary issues and can help us better understand the complex relationship between law, society, and culture. The laws we looked at mostly pertain to marriage and divorce, property, and child custody. The laws are mostly focused on protecting men and making women the attacker. They want men to be the victims and therefore make laws that only benefit men. Feminist studies and what they are. Feminist legal studies is an interdisciplinary field that examines the intersection between law and gender and seeks to understand how the law shapes and is shaped by gender relations. It started in the 1970s as a response to the perceived exclusion of women from legal discourse and the marginalization of feminist perspectives within legal scholarship and practice. Feminist legal scholars examine a range of legal issues and questions, including gender-based discrimination and violence, reproductive rights, family law, employment law, criminal law, and international human rights law. Feminist studies also analyze the ways in which legal ideas and institutions reinforce gender-based power dynamics and seek to develop alternative approaches to laws and legal practices that prioritize gender justice and equality. Overall, feminist legal studies seeks to transform the idea of legal theory and the practice of legal theory by bringing a feminist perspective to the conversations on legal issues and by challenging and transforming existing legal structures and norms that back up gender inequality. Feminist studies are aimed at combating the initial laws and making them more inclusive towards women. They aim to make women to be able to divorce without having to jump through hoops. They aim to change the way that laws are constructed so that women can own and hold their own property, and they can have jobs of power. They are also committed to enacting social justice and recognizing the experiences and perspectives of marginalized groups, including women, people of color, LGBTQ+ individuals, and other groups who have historically been excluded or marginalized within the legal system. Feminist studies and what they are. Feminist study examples. Some examples of feminist legal studies are women's rights and gender equality. Feminist legal scholars have analyzed legal frameworks and policies that impact women's rights, including reproductive rights, employment, discrimination, gender-based violence, and sexual harassment. Interdisciplinary and identity. Feminist legal studies also recognizes that gender intersects with other social identities and structures of power, such as race, ethnicity, class, sexuality, and ability. Scholars in this field examine how these intersections impact experiences of discrimination and marginalization and explore legal strategies that take into account these intersecting identities. Legal education. Feminist legal studies scholars also examine how legal education challenges dominant power structures and gender stereotypes. They explore ways to integrate feminist perspectives into legal education and promote a more inclusive and equitable learning environment. International law and human rights. Feminist legal studies has also made a significant contributions to international law and human rights discourse, exploring the gender dimensions of issues such as human trafficking, gender violence in conflict, and global economic inequality. Queer legal theory. Feminist legal scholars have also engaged with queer legal theory, examining the legal frameworks that impact LGBTQ+ individuals and communities and exploring strategies for achieving legal recognition and protection for marginalized sexual and gender identities. This photo is from the Royal Court of Justice in London. Feminist Studies and What They Are, Part 2. A quote that I feel connects to the idea of feminist studies. A lunatic or idiot cannot lawfully contract a marriage, but insanity after marriage does not make the marriage null or void. A lunatic may contract a marriage during a lucid interval. Deaf and dumb people may marry by signs. The consent of the father or guardians is necessary to the marriage of an infant, i.e., a person under 21, unless the marriage takes place by banns. The consent of the mother is not necessary if there is a father or guardian appointed by him. Laws Concerning Women, page 3. This is saying that only the consent of the father or a guardian, meaning a male one, is needed to marry off a daughter or woman. This is what the feminist legal studies are seeking to change, making it so a mother could decide or even let the girl decide for herself instead of giving her off like cattle. I chose this photo of Malala because she fought in 2012 for women to be able to get an education in Pakistan. Feminist Studies and What They Are, Part 3. Another quote that I feel connects. Any woman to whom such certificate of the visiting surgeon relates may, if she thinks fit, proceed to the certified hospital named in that certificate and place herself there for medical treatment. But if after the certificate is delivered to her and she neglects or refuses to do so, the superintendent of police or a constable acting under his orders shall apprehend her and convey her with all practicable speed to that hospital and place her there for medical treatment, and the certificate of the visiting surgeon shall be sufficient authority for him doing so. Contagious Diseases Act 1. This is another example of what the feminist legal studies are trying to change. Only women were prosecuted for carrying sexual diseases, even though it was probably the men who were having sex with many women in short periods of time. Feminist legal studies are trying to change the view on women because of things like this. This connects to the treatment of women in the legal system, and I use this quote again to show how that relates to the idea. Similarities. Law and literature and feminist legal studies are both interdisciplinary fields that explore the relationships between law and society and seek to understand how law shapes and is shaped by social norms, values, and power relations. Both fields look at how legal concepts and issues are represented in literature and seek to use said literature as a tool to understand the legal system and its effects on individuals and society. They both also examine the ways in which legal institutions and ideas reinforce social hierarchies, and power imbalances, and seek to develop alternative approaches to law and legal practices that prioritize justice, equality, and human rights. In addition, both fields use critical and interdisciplinary approaches to analyze legal issues, drawing on theories and methodologies from disciplines such as critical legal theory, feminist theory, and post-colonial theory. Both law and literature and feminist legal studies are making, looking at, and enforcing laws. Both of the ideas are aimed at mostly one gender. Law and literature was mostly looking at men in law, while feminist legal studies were looking at changing the laws to be more inclusive of women and other minorities in law. In my opinion, those who the laws are made for are made by them. An example of this is men were creating the laws that favored men, while women were the ones looking to change the standard and get women included in law in a positive light rather than as they were seen before. Differences. While law and literature and feminist legal studies share some similarities, there are also some key differences between the two fields. One key difference is that law and literature tends to focus more on literary texts, using literature as a way to explore legal issues and concepts, while feminist legal studies focuses more directly on the legal system itself, analyzing the ways in which law and legal institutions affect gender relations and seeking to transform legal frameworks to promote gender justice and equality. Another difference is that law and literature is often more concerned with the cultural and social aspects of law, analyzing how legal themes and ideas are expressed in literary texts and how literature reflects social attitude towards law and justice. In contrast, feminist legal studies tends to be more focused on legal theory and practice, examining legal concepts and frameworks and seeking to develop new approaches to law and legal practice that prioritize gender justice and equality. While both fields are interdisciplinary and draw on theories and methodologies from a range of disciplines, feminist legal studies tends to draw more heavily on feminist theory and critical legal theory, while law and literature may incorporate a wider range of disciplinary perspectives, such as legal theory, cultural studies, and sociology. Treatment of women in the legal system. In the 1800s, women were largely excluded from the legal system in many countries, and when they did happen to come into contact with the law, they were often treated unfairly and unequally. For example, in the United States, women were generally not allowed to serve on juries or as lawyers, and married women had limited legal rights. Under the common law principle of coverture, a married woman's legal identity was subsumed under that of her husband, and she was not allowed to own property or enter into contracts without her husband's permission. Women who were accused of crimes were often treated more harshly than men and were subject to sexist stereotypes and assumptions that made it difficult for them to receive a fair trial. In cases of rape or sexual assault, women were often required to prove that they had resisted their attacker, and their sexual history could be used against them in court. Overall, the legal system in the 1800s was deeply patriarchal and discriminatory towards women, and it would take many years of activism and legal reform to begin to address these injustices. As can be seen in the image, when women are in court, even nowadays, people like to say that they are ruled by their emotions, not by facts and things like that. A quote showing the unfair treatment of women. Any woman to whom any such certificate of the visiting surgeon relates may, if she thinks fit, proceed to the certified hospital named in that certificate and place herself there for medical treatment. But if after the certificate is delivered to her she neglects or refuses to do so, the superintendent of police or a constable acting under his orders shall apprehend her and convey her with all practical speed to that hospital and place her there for medical treatment, and the certificate of the visiting surgeon shall be a sufficient authority to him for doing so. Contagious Diseases Act 1. I wanted to use this quote again because I really felt like it encapsulated the treatment of women in the legal system, because the quote is essentially saying that if she receives this, she can proceed if she sees fit, but if she doesn't see fit and she doesn't go, she will be forcefully brought there. So it's not a decision on her part, it's a decision on the men who were around her. This is the photo that was presented to us on the first day of class, and it just really encompasses the treatment of women, how you start out in a cradle and you're basically just used to have children, and then by the time you get to 60 and 70, you've basically lost all of your value and your helpfulness. Interdisciplinary. Feminist legal studies is a branch of legal theory that examines the intersection of gender and law. Literature and law seem like two different fields of study, but they have in common a concern for how human experience and values are expressed and represented in society. Law is concerned with the regulation of behavior, while literature is connected to the expression of ideas and emotions. However, both law and literature are shaped by social and cultural norms. And reflect the values and beliefs of the society in which they are produced. In feminist legal studies, literary theory has been used to critique and challenge traditional legal concepts and structures. For example, feminist legal scholars have analyzed the representation of women in legal texts, such as statutes and court opinions, and have identified biases and assumptions that reflect and reinforce patriarchal norms. Literature has also been used to explore the experiences of women within the legal system. Feminist legal scholars have analyzed novels, plays, and other forms of literature to examine the ways in which women are represented in legal settings and to explore the emotional and psychological impact of legal processes on women's lives. Law and literature has also been used to explore broader social and cultural issues related to gender and power. Using literature, feminist legal scholars have explored the connections between gender, sexuality, and violence, as well as the ways in which legal systems fail to protect women. Question 2. You are the director of a new student exchange program and must decide first whether you'll admit women, and second, which of our heroines would spend a semester at UNE. Use Frances Power Cobb's essay, The Education of Women, to explain your decision about whether UNE will admit women. Then use the novels to explain which heroine would be most likely to succeed in the 21st century and which would have the most difficulty and why. Below is a photo of Frances Power Cobb. I believe that UNE would admit women. Frances Power Cobb talks about how women need education, and I agree. Based off UNE in the 21st century, I think that they would admit women. Campus is covered in blue light safety stations for safety, particularly women's safety. The classes that are offered here are more women-focused, and the dorms feel welcoming and safe for women, with only those residents being able to get into the rooms themselves. Even in suites, each room has their own key, and your key card only works in certain buildings. So you can't get into buildings that you don't live in unless it's a mailroom or education building. UNE in 2023 is about 70% female and 30% male, so I feel like it would be willing to admit women. 1967 was the first time that women were fully admitted into UNE campus, but it was St. Francis's College at the time. Below is a photo of 3 young women on our football field. Which heroine would spend a semester here? I think that Juliet would love to spend a semester here. She attended Girton College at Cambridge, so I think she would really love to spend a semester at an American school. I feel like the school would really fit her because we have a lot of English classes and she does things like typewriting. We also have political science and criminology, as well as women and gender studies. I feel like she would like to take classes in some, if not all, of those majors. It's a similar climate here to London, and we are close to where her family were for a little while. Since the climate is the same, I think she would like it because she can ride her bike around in the warmer months. Below is a photo of Girton College at Cambridge. Which would be most likely to succeed? I feel like Juliet and Helen would do the best here. I think this because Juliet has already gone to one school, so I think she would be able to do it again. Juliet was described as a Girton girl. This means she attended Girton College, which was one of the 2 women's colleges at Cambridge. It was considered the more intellectual of the 2. She was able to use this education to get jobs as a typewriter. I think that she would love to go back to school to further her education in a subject such as English or some sort of marketing so she could either write for herself or write for someone else. Looking at a poem from May 8th, 1884, named The Women of the Future. The women of the future shall be deeply read, that's certain, with all the education gained at Newham or at Girton. Shall puzzle men in algebra with horrible quadratics, dynamics, and the mysteries of higher mathematics. Or if she turns to classic tomes, a literary roamer, she'll give you bits of Horace or synonymous lines from Homer. I feel like this really fits with Juliet's attitude. I think that Juliet would like that she would be taken more seriously in this time period. I think that she would be able to date whoever she wanted without the same constraints that there were in her day. Who would be most likely to succeed? Part 2. I feel like Juliet and Helen would do best here. Helen got herself out of her abusive relationship and took her son and ran. She was able to make a life for herself, and she is resourceful, so I think she would be a good fit to go to school here. I think there are many classes that they both really love, as well as being around people who are like them. Helen was empowered to get herself away from her husband, and she's really driven to achieve what she wants to do. I feel like she would love the adventure of going to college. She remarries Gilbert, so I feel like that would make attending college a little hard. UNE has no married student housing, so they would have to live off campus, which you are allowed to do, and there are many houses around here that they could live in. She also has a child, so that could be kind of hard for her to manage with school. But in the 21st century, we have many daycares and nannies that could come and watch him while she's at school, or her husband could even watch him. I feel like she would be driven by her son even more, though, because she would want to get an education so that she can provide from him. I think that Helen could be an art major because she loved art. She painted, so I feel like she would do really well as an art major here. Which would be most likely not to succeed? I feel like Ruth and Augusta would do the worst out of all of the girls. I think that Ruth is too emotional to go to college. She worked from a young age and got pregnant by a guy who left her. She lied to get a job, which would not go well in 2023. I feel like she would not want to leave her son. She seems like she would be better suited to go to a trade school or get a job rather than going to college. She could also do online school because we can do that now in 2023. An example of her being too emotional is on page 77, when Ruth says her only hope was to die and she believed she was dying. And on page 79, in her rush to the awful death of suicide, she was going to commit suicide because the man she thought loved her left her behind. She would never survive in the 21st century where women date many men before they decide to get married. I could see her getting very attached to a man, and when he inevitably dumps her throwing herself into the Saco River because she cannot, manage him leaving her. Ruth seems to be very attached to her child, and I can't see her leaving him to attend school. She was also very poor at the time, so I don't see her being able to afford college in 2023, especially UNE now that tuition has gone up so much. She was also only 16, I think, when the book starts, so she would be too young to attend college then. She did not begin to raise her child without help. Ruth had the Bensons to assist her, and according to Miss Beaton's book of Household Management by Isabella Beaton in 1861, when obliged to call in the services of hired assistants, she must trust the dearest obligation of her life to one who, from her social sphere, has probably notions of rearing children diametrically opposed to the preconceived ideas of the mother, and at enmity with all her sentiments of rights and prejudice of position. I feel as though she would not be able to continue to raise her child if she went to college, and I don't see her leaving him with the Bensons. Juliet has raised herself on two pieces of literature, Romeo and Juliet and the Odyssey, and off of evolutionary theory. college students can relate to her struggle for existence because we're all poor in college as well, and we're also all trying to figure out who we are. We have to prove ourselves in society today, so I feel like Juliet would do well because she had to work a lot harder in her time to be recognized for the things she did. We have a lot of first generation students here, so she could fit in with them. We have a big biology department, and she liked the study of evolutionary theory. She would probably be an English major with a bio minor. I still feel as though she would not do as well here as Juliet or Helen. Who would most likely not succeed? Part 2. I feel like Augusta would not want to be tied down to one place like college. I think she longs to travel the world and would want to be constantly on the move. She seems like too much of a free spirit to go to college full time, maybe online classes. She got a man's will tattooed on her back for goodness sake. I feel like she would want to live in many different countries and get more tattoos. She also got married, and I can't see her leaving him or him attending college with her. On page 60 of Mr. Meeson's will, there is a quote: "Happy man and happy girl, they will live to find that life has joys for those who are good and well off, but that it has no joy so holy and so complete as that which they were now experiencing, the first kiss of true and honest love." I can't see her wanting to leave him. According to Castle's Household Guide, new and revised edition, 4th volume, from the 1880s, it is not always desirable to leave property wholly in the personal control of a married lady who may sacrifice her own interests while under the control of her husband. I could see her sacrificing her own interests to pursue college here, so that she could spend time with him. And then we have all of my sources. Thank you.